My son stared at my grocery receipt like it was a crime scene and said, "Stop wasting my money." The next morning, I showed him it was mine, not his. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It was Monday, March 3rd in Lakewood, Ohio, late winter, sunlight thin as paper. I set a brown bag of groceries on my kitchen counter. Oatmeal, chicken thighs, generic heart meds, the usual, and Ryan leaned over the receipt as if it could confess. 62.14, he said, tapping the ink with a fingernail. "Dad, this is why you're always broke. You spend like it's free." I didn't answer right away. The kettle clicked off. I poured tea and watched steam rise, counted 3 deep breaths like my cardiologist taught me. On the table beside the mail sat a neat row of bills. Gas, 118.37s, due March 12. Ohio Edison, 94.22, due March 9. And the one that never failed to make my jaw tighten, St. Luke's Cardiology, 432 $432 on a payment plan, underlined twice. Beside them lay my spiral notebook ledger, page dated 303, written in my careful block letters, pension deposit $1,586.40, Rex refill $28, Aldi $62.14. It's not your money, son, I said finally. It's my pension and my savings. You don't pay these? I tapped the bills. I do. Ryan wore the expression he saves for boardrooms and client calls. He sells retirement solutions, rollovers, annuities, promises. He talked me into letting him streamline my finances last fall, after my mild stroke. Convenience, he called it. He'd set up online access, organized autopay, even added his name as authorized user on one checking account to handle things when you're under the weather. I'd agreed, grateful, tired, trying to be practical. What I didn't see then was how easily authorized becomes entitled in someone else's mouth. He slid his phone across the counter. "Look." A banking app glowed on the screen. My checking balance circled in red, $1,208.67. "You had over $14,000 in October, Dad. Where did it go?" "In October," I said, "your sister moved and I put $3,200 down on her security deposit in first month. In December, I paid $2,780 to fix the furnace so your kids wouldn't sleep in a freezer at Christmas. In January, I covered your mother's headstone inscription, $640, which you said you'd split but forgot. February was property tax, $3,114's, Cuyahoga County. That's where it went." He didn't blink. "You don't track your spending." I opened the spiral ledger to the yellowed carbon copy tucked inside. County Treasurer, 3,514, $2. 220, cashier's check number 27814. Stapled to it was a narrow teleslip, savings to checking transfer. 4,000 signed with my careful hand. Proof has a particular weight when you set it down. My kitchen table sank under it. He switched tactics. "This is why I said we should consolidate everything. If we moved the CD and the IRA under my management, I could grow it. Right now, your IRA is just sitting there at $118,420, your bleeding value." "I'm not bleeding," I said. "I'm living." Ryan's jaw tightened. He lowered his voice the way he does when he wants to sound reasonable. "Dad, you're 71. You had a stroke in August. You cannot keep making decisions like this. Give me power of attorney. I'll cap your spending, pay your bills, and protect the principal. Otherwise, you'll put this house at risk." My eyes traveled to the deed copy framed on the hallway wall. 2842 Arden Road, paid off the year your mother beat breast cancer the first time. I remembered the day I walked out of the county clerk's office with that deed, how light my shoes felt on the pavement. "This house is my retirement, Ryan," I said. "Every nail, every receipt. Not a chip for sale," he scoffed, pushed back from the counter. "You're wasting my money, Dad." That was the moment. The sentence came out of him like a reflex. My money. There's a kind of silence that follows a line you can't unsay. It sits in a room and measures everyone's soul. I picked up the ledger, closed it gently, and slid it into the drawer with the spare keys. "Okay," I said. "If you think it's yours, come back tomorrow at 9. I'll show you exactly whose money it is. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house sounded like the echo of that one sentence, "You're wasting my money." The words replayed until they lost shape and turned into something worse, a truth he believed. At dawn, the kitchen smelled of burnt toast and cold tea. The ledger still sat in the drawer where I'd left it, along with the spare keys and the last letter your mother ever wrote me, the one that started, "Promise me you'll never let anyone take what you worked for." By 9, the sound of tires on gravel told me he'd kept his appointment. Ryan stepped out of his black SUV, briefcase in hand, like he was here for a client, not his father. "Morning," he said flat. "I brought the forms." He laid them on the table like a lawyer dropping evidence: power of attorney, financial, durable healthcare proxy, and a printed spreadsheet labeled Hayes Family Holdings. "I drafted these for your convenience," he said. "All you have to do is sign. I'll handle the rest, bills, investments, everything." I flipped the first page. In neat type it read, "The principal grants the agent full control over all assets, accounts, and properties, effective immediately." My name at the top. His name below. "You've been planning this?" I said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Planning? No, preparing. You're not managing anymore. You're bleeding out assets for pity projects and nostalgia. You need structure." "Structure," I repeated. "Or control." He sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, that corporate gesture of patience worn thin. "Dad, this isn't personal. I'm trying to protect what's left. If you want me to keep paying property insurance and taxes, I need authority. Right now the house alone costs nearly $5,000 a year just to sit here." "You're sitting on a dying investment." "Investment," I said softly. "You mean my home?" For a moment he hesitated, as if realizing what he'd just said. Then the mask came back. "It's just math. You can't take it with you." "I can take my name with me," I said. He leaned closer. "Sign the papers, Dad." I looked him dead in the eye. "No," he blinked. "No?" "No," I said again, steady. "Not today, not tomorrow, never." He stood up so fast his chair scraped the tile. "You're making a mistake. If you don't sign, I'll have to..." "To what?" I asked. "Prove I'm incompetent?" He froze. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Then he gathered his papers and walked to the door. "You always did think the world owed you something," he said. "Fine, you want to handle it?" "Handle it?" The door slammed behind him. I sank into the chair. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was disbelief that the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the one who cried when he broke my fishing rod, now looked at me like a liability on a spreadsheet. By afternoon, my neighbor Tom Keller stopped by with his usual coffee and gossip. "You all right, Art?" "Saw your son peel out like he was racing the cops." I forced a smile. "Just a disagreement about money." He laughed. "That's every family, ain't it? My kids think my pension's their vacation fund." Something in that hit too close. I asked him, "Ever think they'll take it if you let them close enough?" He shrugged. "Not if I make sure they can't touch it." That sentence lit a spark. That night I took out my spiral ledger, opened to a fresh page, and wrote across the top, 304, proof of ownership. One by one, I listed every account and document tied to my name. IRA, 118,420 savings. CD, 42,600 mature set 12. House deed, 2842 Arden Dren paid 2016. Pension and monthly 1,486.40. A deposit third of each month. Each line steadied my breathing. These weren't just numbers. They were the map of a life earned, not gifted. Around midnight, I logged into my online banking, the account Ryan had helped set up. His name still sat there under Authorized User. I hovered over the Remove Access button for a long moment before clicking it. The confirmation message appeared. Access privileges for Ryan Hayes revoked. For the first time in months, I slept. But the next morning my phone buzzed with notifications. Bank login attempt denied. Multiple failed passwords. Then a text from Ryan. "Dad, what did you do?" "Call me." I didn't. That evening, an email arrived from the bank manager. "Mr. Hayes, we received a request from your son Ryan Hayes earlier today to reactivate joint account privileges. Please confirm authorization." I replied, "Do not authorize. He no longer represents me. I printed that email, dated it, and slid it into my ledger under the tab Evidence 0305. The collapse wasn't just emotional anymore. It was official. That night I sat at the kitchen window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. The world outside was quiet, but inside something new had begun. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll show him exactly whose money he's been spending. The morning of March 6th came cold and blue. The air smelled like iron and thawing snow. I drove into town before the sun had burned through the haze, parked outside First Lakewood Credit Union, and sat there for a full minute before stepping out. Inside, the branch manager, Linda Price, greeted me with that familiar politeness reserved for long-time customers who don't cause trouble. "Morning, Mr. Hayes," she said. "How's retirement treating you?" "Could be quieter," I replied. "I need to update some account information." She smiled. "Of course. Anything specific?" I slid my state ID across the counter along with a folded sheet of paper, a printed record of my accounts, each one with Ryan's name listed under authorized user. "I want these permissions removed permanently. No shared access, no online management through third parties. Just me." Linda read the paper, raised an eyebrow and nodded. "We can do that. You'll need to sign a full authorization revocation and update your online credentials. Once processed, no one but you will be able to move or view funds." That sentence, "no one but you," felt like air after drowning. She printed the forms. As I signed, the pen scratched across the paper with a quiet finality. One signature for each account: savings, checking, IRA management portal, even the safety deposit box key card. "Do you want to change the box code as well?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Assign a new one." By noon, I walked out with a small envelope, new password sealed inside, and a receipt stamped confirmation. Access revoked 3/6, 11:48 a.m. I added it to the ledger under proof, March 6th, but money wasn't the only lock he'd slipped his hands into. At home, I checked the desk drawers where I kept old files, insurance policies, pension letters, tax returns. 2 folders were missing: Property Insurance 2024 and Home Deed copies. That was when I remembered last Thanksgiving, when Ryan had offered to digitize everything for safety. He'd walked out that day with a stack of papers in his leather briefcase. I'd thanked him, foolishly, so I called Tom Keller again. "Tom, still got that contact from when you sold your rental property?" "You mean Ben Wallace?" "The title examiner?" "Sure do." "Want me to call him?" "Please," I said. "I just want to verify my deed status." 2 hours later, Ben called me back. "Arthur, I checked with the Cuyahoga County clerk. Your deed's clean, still in your name alone. No lines, no transfer attempts, no joint filing." "Why, someone trying something?" "Just making sure," I said. That night I spread everything on my dining table: receipts, title confirmations, bank slips, and photographed each document. I uploaded the images to an encrypted flash drive, labeled Personal Legacy Proof, and sealed it inside a small lockbox. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was insurance. The next day Ryan called. His tone was half-forced calm, half-simmering threat. "Dad, I just got a call from the bank. They said you revoked my access." "I did. Why?" "I told you," I said. "It's my money." He exhaled hard. "You're being manipulated, Dad. Someone's feeding you this nonsense. Probably Keller or one of those old guys at the coffee shop." "No one's feeding me anything," I said. "I'm finally listening to myself." He laughed under his breath. "You can't manage all this. You'll mess something up. And when you do, don't come to me to fix it." "I won't," I said simply, and hung up. That night he didn't text, but I noticed something else. 2 missed calls from Brightview Financial, his firm. The caller ID showed Corporate Accounts Division. The next morning, the voicemail came through. "Hello, Mr. Hayes. This is Sarah from Brightview Financial. We received a transfer authorization form from Ryan Hayes regarding your IRA consolidation. Could you confirm this request?" My pulse kicked hard. He'd tried to move my IRA, the retirement fund I'd spent 30 years building, into his firm's portfolio. If I hadn't changed those access permissions, it might have gone through. I called back immediately. That authorization is fake, I told Sarah. Do not transfer or release any funds. Ryan Hayes does not represent me or hold power of attorney. Please record that statement and send me written confirmation. She hesitated. Of course, Mr. Hayes, I'll email you right now. By 2 p.m. I had it in writing, dated, time-stamped, and signed electronically by Brightview Financial's compliance officer. I printed it, folded it neatly, and wrote across the top, "Attempted unauthorized transfer, March 7th, 2:06 p.m. It was proof, the kind you can hold. That evening, I drove to Tom's place again. He tried to move my IRA, I told him. Tom's eyes widened. That's theft, Art. You can report that. Not yet, I said. Not until I make sure the lesson sticks, he chuckled. You're planning something, I smiled faintly. Not revenge, just education. Before I left, he handed me a card. If you're serious, call this guy. Richard Epps, retired CPA, does consulting for elder fraud cases. Quiet, thorough, and he hates bullies. I slipped the card into my wallet. The plan had already started writing itself in my head. Step by step, legally, cleanly, and with a precision Ryan would never see coming. By the time I got home, the lake had gone still. I sat on the porch, breathing the cold, steady air. In the reflection on the glass door, I saw my mother's words again. Promise me you'll never let anyone take what you worked for. I whispered back, I won't, Mom, not this time. Tomorrow, I'd call Richard Epps. Tomorrow my quiet revenge would begin. I walked into Richard Epps's small office on March 9th, and the place smelled like old paper and peppermint gum. Richard is the kind of retired CPA who keeps ledgers for fun and gets a little thrill out of finding where money went wrong. He sat behind a desk piled with binders, eyed my flash drive and said, Show me the trail. I handed him the printed bank slips, the Brightview email, the teller receipt for the county tax payment, everything I'd sorted and dated, county treasurer check, 3 signed $114 and 2 to 20. Furnace repair check 2,180, 1214. The savings to check transfer slip 4,000, 1108 with my signature. He flipped through the pages, nodded, and then turned the page where I'd stapled a set of downloaded transaction records showing 3 transfers out of my checking to an account ending in 8412, labeled on the bank printout as management fee, $3,200 on 11/10, $2,500 on 12/22, $3,000 on 01/05. The ledger beneath it, my own careful handwriting, showed none of those payments were for advisory fees I'd authorized. You didn't sign anything that authorizes a management fee, Richard said, and his voice was flat. If these went to Ryan's personal account, that's a problem. If they went to a business account under his name, it's still a problem without disclosure. He pulled out a form and circled a line. We'll do a forensic accounting. I'll verify every transfer and where it landed. Then we file a demand for reversal with the bank and Brightview. If they refuse, we file for injunctive relief. But first, we document everything so it's airtight. That was the moment revenge stopped being emotional and started being procedural. I liked that. Revenge with rules. By March 10th, I had a stack of documents, Richard's engagement letter, signed and stamped, a notarized affidavit of the teller slip confirming my county tax payment, and a printed email from Brightview's compliance officer that said, in black and white, no transfers will be executed without principal confirmation. I took all of it to First Lakewood Credit Union and asked for a formal reversal request. The branch manager, Linda, typed details into her screen and printed a stamped form. Request for provisional reversal, investigation, submitted 3 to 10, 2:12 p.m. She gave me a copy and said, we'll place a provisional hold on outgoing transfers pending our investigation. Richard called the next morning. I traced 3 of those management fee transfers, he said. 2 went to an account registered under Ryan Hayes Enterprises. 1 landed in a personal account. Total moved, $8,700 between November and January. We can demand a freeze and reversal. Also, if Ryan is a registered advisor and didn't disclose fees properly, the state will take an interest. I felt the ledger in my pocket like a talisman. My mother's handwriting on that old letter came back to me. Promise me you'll never let anyone take what you worked for. I'd put my life's work on a table, and now a man with a badge of experience was showing me the legal route to get it back. That same day, I hired a private investigator, Maya Ruiz, recommended by Richard. Maya was 40, sharp, and had a soft way of asking questions that made people show what they'd rather hide. I needed to know whether Ryan had been drawing on my accounts for personal luxuries or funneling money into business accounts billed as management. Maya's first report came on March 12th. A photo of Ryan at a downtown steakhouse on 12/22, a credit card receipt in the register showing $432.60, and a matching transfer from my checking to the 84-2 account 2 days later. The timestamps lined up. Not proof of criminal theft necessarily, but evidence of pattern, money flowing out labeled in ways I'd never approved and landing in places that benefited him. I compiled everything into a folder labeled Evidence, March 12th, and drove to Brightview Financial's small compliance office. I handed the compliance officer the printed email that Sarah had sent, the CPA's preliminary report, and Maya's observation log. She read, frowned, and promised to put an internal flag on Ryan's account and to suspend any outgoing transfers pending written confirmation from me. If your son is a registered agent here, he's bound by our code, she said. This looks like a breach of fiduciary duty on its face. We'll open a formal inquiry. Back at home, I drafted a certified letter, calm, precise, not a shred of theatricality, addressed to Ryan. It listed the transfers by date and amount, provided copies of the teleslips and Brightview's confirmation, and demanded that he cease all access and return any funds withdrawn without written authorization. I had Alan Pierce, my attorney, look it over, and then we sent it certified mail on March 13th. The postal receipt went into my ledger. The next morning, Ryan called. He was loud, trying to make the phone a courtroom. Dad, what is this? You're embarrassing me. Stop this now. I'm not embarrassing anyone, I said. I'm asking for proof. Let the bank and Brightview investigate. He hung up. Minutes later, his name appeared on my caller ID again, but I let it ring. He left a voicemail, this time quieter and coated with menace. You don't know what you're doing. If you push this, there will be consequences. I saved it, time-stamped it, and uploaded it to my encrypted drive. Methodical, lawful, and tracked, every action wrote itself into the ledger. The line between taking back what was mine and ruining my son was thin, but I kept reminding myself of the difference. I was not trying to hurt him for pleasure. I was trying to stop him from taking what I had earned. As I closed the folder that night, the phone buzzed again. The bank had placed a provisional hold on transfers, and Brightview had opened an inquiry. The first real, tangible crack showed in Ryan's armor. He hadn't expected paperwork to be a weapon. He'd expected me to be embarrassed and back down. Instead, I had Richard, Maya, Linda, Brightview's compliance officer, and my own careful hand on the wheel. The next act would be when he realized this. It wasn't a skirmish. This was a fight he'd have to answer for. Publicly, the paper trail doesn't lie, and men who trust only their mouths usually forget how to read a ledger. By mid-March, the house felt smaller, as if every hallway had turned into an alley where the neighbors watched. Word moved faster than I did now. Someone at church had overheard a whisper. Tom's kid at the hardware store had seen a stamped envelope, and by the time I opened my front door on March 16th, a florist had left a bowl of sympathy cookies and a note that read, "Hope it all clears up soon." I kept the note folded in my pocket like a small challenge. The bank's provisional hold came through on paper. First, Lakewood Credit Union. Investigation, hold placed 311. Re-FA-BRI 3LC219. Brightview's compliance reply sat in my inbox dated 3/12. 10:22 a.m. from Michelle Lang. Compliance, we have opened an inquiry into the transfers. No outgoing transfers will be processed without express written authorization from Mr. Hayes. I printed both, stamped them with evidence, 0316, and slid them into the folder labeled proof. Ongoing, Ryan reacted like a man burning his hands to see if fire was real. He called, his voice raw. "Dad, drop this. I can fix the banking glitch. I'll get it sorted. You don't understand how these things work." I didn't tell him I already understood quite well. How glitches can be planned, how authorization can be faked, and how convenience masks greed. He showed up unannounced that night, shoes tracking mud into my kitchen. "You're making a scene with the bank," he said. "People are talking. Mom's getting calls at work." "Drop it." I looked at him, at the man who used to tie my necktie for me the morning of my first lecture. The man whose kids I raised. "I'm not dropping anything," I said. "I only want what's mine. I have receipts, teleslips, emails, and a CPA who traced transfers to your enterprise account." His face flickered. For a heartbeat, I saw shame. Then he hardened. "You're embarrassing me," he said, and left without another word. The next morning, a man in a suit I'd never seen before stood on my porch. He introduced himself as Eric Dalton, Esq, from Bennett and Dalton. Not the Bennett farmer family, but a small local firm that did defense work for businessmen. He said he represented Ryan on an emergency basis and asked politely for any copies of correspondence I'd shared with Brightview. I handed him a copy of the certified letter I'd mailed 313, the postal receipt still stapled in my ledger. He left with a promise to resolve this quietly. Quiet seldom works when pride is involved. 2 days later, a local blogger posted a smear piece. "Elderly man makes unfounded accusations against son. Family drama in Lakewood." The headline sat in my inbox like a slug. I felt the old rage I'd been suppressing. Not toward Ryan this time, but toward whoever thought the story could be flattened into a punchline. I printed the piece, circled the inaccuracies in red ink, and mailed a copy back to the blogger with a one-line note. "Factual errors corrected. Evidence on file, available upon request." Richard called that afternoon. "Alan's drafting a complaint for breach of fiduciary duty and conversion," he said. "If they resist, we file for injunctive relief, freeze the enterprise account, demand an accounting, and we go from there." He made the legal terms sound neat, but his voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd spent a life balancing ledgers and finding justice in ink. "Courtroom's the likely venue if Ryan doesn't cooperate. Courtroom." The word landed like a bell. I hadn't wanted spectacle, but I hadn't been willing to die quietly either. On March 19th, Brightview sent us a formal notice of internal findings, preliminary. It read, in part, "Several transfers from Mr. Hayes's accounts appear to have been directed to accounts associated with Mr. Ryan Hayes and Ryan Hayes Enterprises without clear written authorization on file. We recommend formal mediation or legal resolution." The phrase "recommend formal mediation" felt like a soft cord tightening. Ryan's patience thinned. He began to call friends and neighbors, spinning a story that I'd become forgetful, that I'd been manipulated by outside influences, by Tom, by Richard, even by Maya. He said I was making claims I couldn't prove. He asked why I'd waited months to notice. He wanted to paint me as the unreliable man who forgot payments and then accused his son of theft to cover his own mistakes. I met his gaze the first Sunday we attended church together after all this started. People looked away when they saw us arrive, like we were a headline come to life. In the cry room, a woman murmured, "Poor Ryan having to deal with," and left the phrase unfinished. The shame of being judged by other people's whispers was familiar, but the ledger in my pocket thumped like a heartbeat. Steady, true. At Richard's suggestion, Alan filed the initial complaint draft with the county clerk's office on March 21st. Counts for breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, and a request for accounting. We didn't file to shame. We filed because the facts demanded legal clarity. The filing fee receipt went into my ledger. Clerk's filing fee, $210.0321. That night Ryan called twice. The second time, his voice had a new edge, desperate, dangerous. "Dad, if you go forward with this, you'll ruin us both," he said. "You'll ruin me. You'll ruin Mom. You'll be the man who destroyed his family." I turned the voicemail off and saved it with a note. Threat. Saved 3:21, 10:02 p.m. I told Margaret, no, I told Richard and Alan, that I'd prefer mediation if possible. Let him explain in front of a judge if he wants to, Alan said. If he feels he can't, then he should have thought of that before moving your money. The truth had teeth now, and I could feel the world adjusting around it. In the days that followed, the lines hardened. Friends picked sides quietly. The bank's hold remained. Brightview's inquiry deepened. Ryan stopped coming over for Sunday dinners. He stopped calling the way he used to. He'd become the kind of son who measured worth in account balances and convenience. I'd become the kind of father who'd learned how to lock a door. The next act would not be polite. The courtroom would be an exposed platform, the place where family secrets get pressed like flowers between legal pages. I found I wasn't afraid of the light. I was ready to set it on everything. The mediation room smelled like hotel coffee and nervous cologne. It was Wednesday, April 2nd, at the Lakewood Civic Center. Bright noon light, too many chairs, a table scarred from other people's fights. I sat opposite Ryan and his lawyer, Eric Dalton, while our mediator, a woman named Harper Miles, tapped a tablet and asked the usual calming questions. The room had cameras in the corner, tiny glass witnesses to everything said. I kept my ledger open in front of me like a Bible. We began thinly, with small talk dressed up as procedure. Harper went through the motions, introductions, ground rules, why we were there. Then she asked me to explain what I wanted. I placed on the table copies of the Brightview email, stamped 3/12/10:22 a.m. The bank's provisional hold confirmation 311 Ref 3LC219, the certified letter receipt 313, and Richard's preliminary accounting summary showing $8,700 in questionable transfers. Ryan's lawyer shifted his posture, knight poised to defend. Mr. Hayes, Harper said kindly, this space is for solutions. Are you open to mediation? I am, I replied. But I need the record to reflect these transfers and the attempts to move my IRA without confirmation. I tapped the Brightview confirmation with a finger. I also want a commitment that my accounts remain frozen unless I personally authorize movement. They expected anger, a broken old man wanting revenge. Instead, I was precise. I walked Harper through the ledger entries. Tax check $3914, verse 220. Furnace repair $2,780, 12/14. Security deposit for my daughter $3,200, 11/08. I showed the teller slip and the county clerk's handwritten stamp. Each document was a notch on a ruler proving my story. The mediator nodded, making notes. Then Ryan spoke. Dad, you don't have to air family laundry in public. I was trying to help. You tried to profit, I said. That's the difference. He stood, voice rising. You've always been stubborn. You always wanted to hold on to the past. Maybe if you let me manage things, you wouldn't be living on coupons. His eyes flicked to my ledger. You hide receipts and think that proves something. That ledger proves I pay my taxes, I said. It proves I covered your sister's deposit when you promised you would. It proves I never authorized management fees of $3,000 to $4,000 here and there. I pushed the printed transfers toward him. Show me a signed authorization. Show me one email where I approved these fees. His lawyer reached to intercept the papers, but Harper stopped him with an easy hand. We'll review everything before making conclusions, she said. The room hummed. Then Eric Dalton, Ryan's counsel, cleared his throat and dropped a card-sized flash drive on the table. We anticipated your questions, he said. This drive contains statements proving Mr. Hayes' online banking shows Mr. Hayes approved the transfers. He clicked his tablet, and a hashed file name appeared. We can run verification. It's all here. My stomach dropped. For a second, the air in the room thickened. If that drive held a forged timestamp, it could flip everything. But the ledger in my chest, my spiral notebook, the certified mail receipt, Brightview's email, these were not smoke. They were anchors. Harper called for a brief recess to run a verification with Brightview and the bank on the line. We left the mediation room into a narrow hallway where mediators whisper and lawyers conspire. Outside, Ryan tried to wrap an arm around me. "Dad, don't be dramatic," he said low. "If this goes sideways, it'll scare your doctor." I looked at him. "Don't touch me," I said. "Not here." During the recess, Brightview's compliance officer, Michelle Lang, connected via conference phone. The technician on the line said they'd received a transfer authorization packet from an IP. Address registered to Ryan's apartment on March 10th, 11:03 p.m. Eric Dalton's smile looked like a blade. I felt something icy press against my ribs. Then Harper asked a simple question that cut through the static. "Mr. Dalton, can you confirm the chain of custody for that flash drive?" Eric's jaw tightened. "We came prepared." Our client pulled the backup from his own files. "Is there notarized proof or a time-stamped submission to the bank?" Harper pressed. "An audit trail." Eric hesitated, then said, "We have a vendor log. May we see it?" Harper asked. At that moment, a young woman in a navy blazer stepped into the hallway. She carried a manila envelope and moved with the kind of certainty that makes people look up. Her name was Maya Ruiz, my private investigator. I hadn't expected her to appear during the mediation. She'd said she'd be gathering background, but not staging a reveal. She handed the envelope to Harper without fanfare. Inside, a printed vendor log, and over it, a notarized affidavit from Ben Wallace, the title examiner, and a chain of custody printout from Brightview, showing no submissions from Ryan's IP at 11:03 p.m., but instead a failed login attempt, and then a successful transfer request time-stamped from an IP registered to a commercial co-working space downtown, not Ryan's apartment. Maya had traced the flash drive serial number to a thumb drive purchased on 3/11 at a convenience store near Ryan's office. Surveillance footage, stamped 3/11:47 p.m., showed a man who looked like Ryan buying a drive. But the cashier's body cam also recorded a second man who matched Ryan's business partner, Jason Cole, slipping the drive into a bag. Harper looked from the log to the footage to Eric. The mediator's neutrality evaporated into interest. Eric's posture crumpled. We didn't expect this evidence," he stammered. Ryan's face blanched. The room shifted as if pulled on a hinge. What had been a tidy defense now split into new questions about who had physical access to my account's records, who could seed false authorizations, and whether the drive was a plant meant to discredit my claim. Harper closed the manila envelope and set it before her tablet. "Given this new information, I'm suspending this mediation and referring both parties to the bank's forensic team and the county clerk for audit," she said. "And I recommend a temporary restraining order to prevent any further account changes." Ryan looked at me, shame and panic wrestling his features. "Dad," he whispered, "You don't get to say that yet," I replied. "Not until the record is clean." We left the Civic Center under a blue April sky that felt colder. The twist wasn't a theatrical reveal of a smoking gun. It was the sudden realization that the story had layers Ryan hadn't planned for. People with their own motives, a planted drive, and the possibility that someone else had been moving pieces while he tried to claim the board. In the back of my ledger, I added a line: Maya's evidence, vendor log and surveillance 4-2. The fight had new players, and now it wasn't just about money between father and son. It was about truth against manipulation. 2 days after the mediation collapsed, the story that had been whispering around Lakewood exploded into daylight. Brightview Financial issued a press statement on April 4th, confirming irregularities in the account management of one of our independent agents, Ryan Hayes. They used the words "under internal review," which in corporate language meant the iceberg had surfaced. By morning, the phones started ringing. Tom called first. "Art, I saw the article." "You okay?" I told him I was fine. I wasn't. My hands shook so hard I nearly spilled my tea. My name was in print next to words like elder fraud investigation. But the difference was, this time, the truth had context. The local paper quoted Brightview's compliance officer, Michelle Lang. "Mr. Arthur Hayes acted responsibly and in full cooperation with our inquiry." They printed the phrase twice. That sentence, 12 words, wiped away months of humiliation. Ryan didn't call. Instead, his lawyer, Eric Dalton, reached out through Alan. Ryan wants to avoid court, he said. He's willing to settle privately, return all funds in dispute, and sign a non-interference agreement regarding Mr. Hayes' financial assets. Alan relayed it with the patience of a man who's seen dozens of families tear themselves apart over less. He's scared, Alan said. They have enough to suspend his license. If Brightview refers this to the state, he could lose everything. I stared out the kitchen window, the same one I'd stood at while Ryan accused me of wasting his money. He already did, I said quietly. He just doesn't know it yet. Still, I agreed to one more meeting. It took place on April 8th, inside Bennett and Dalton's conference room. Grey walls, glass table, the scent of cold coffee and air freshener. Ryan looked smaller than I remembered, the swagger gone. He wore a navy suit, the same color as the one from the family photo we'd taken on his wedding day. He kept his eyes on the table. Eric began, with his practiced calm. Mr. Hayes, my client wants to apologize and offer restitution. I didn't respond. I slid across the table a small envelope. Inside were copies of the bank receipts, the ones he'd tried to erase, along with the Brightview vendor log that exposed his fake flash drive. This, I said, isn't about money anymore. It's about integrity. Ryan finally looked up. His voice cracked like dry wood. Dad, I messed up. I thought I was helping. I really did. I thought, no, I interrupted. You thought you'd inherit while I was still breathing. You thought your name on my accounts meant ownership. But it didn't. It meant trust. And you broke it, he swallowed hard. I'll pay it back. Every dollar, I leaned back, tired but steady. You can't pay back dignity, son. You can only stop stealing it. Eric slid over a document, settlement agreement and mutual release. It outlined the full repayment of $8,700 within 10 days, permanent removal of Ryan from all associated accounts, and acknowledgement that any future contact regarding finances would go through legal counsel. I signed it. Ryan signed it. The pens clicked like small verdicts. Afterward, I walked out into the parking lot, the air sharp and clean after rain. The sun broke through the clouds in bands, washing the cars in gold. Maya was waiting near her sedan, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. You did it, she said. I didn't do anything, I replied. The truth did. She smiled faintly. Same thing most days. That evening I found a letter slid under my front door, Ryan's handwriting, shaky and uneven. Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to lose everything. I guess I already did. You were right about trust. Once it's broken, there's no fixing it. I'm moving out of state for a while. Tell Mom I'm sorry. Ryan, I folded it neatly and tucked it into the back of my ledger under personal, April 8th. I didn't feel victory. I felt a kind of quiet, like the house itself had exhaled. The next week brought the aftershocks. Brightview suspended Ryan's license pending state review. The Ohio Division of Securities opened an ethics inquiry. Neighbors who'd once pitied me now nodded at the grocery store. Their faces softened with the quiet respect people reserve for someone who stood up without shouting. Tom came by on a Friday, brought a pie from his wife. So, he said, slicing it, you going to keep that ledger now that it's all over? I smiled. Oh, it's not over, Tom, it's just organized. He laughed, clinked his fork against mine. You're something else, Art. The truth was simpler. I'd learned that revenge doesn't always come from rage. Sometimes it comes from documentation, patience, and the courage to outlast a lie. Late that night, I sat in my armchair, the ledger open to the first page, 0303, proof of ownership. I added one last line in slow, careful ink, 4-15, settlement completed, balance restored, trust gone. I closed it and stared at the framed deed on the wall, the one for 2842 Arden Road. The house looked smaller now, but safer. I whispered, "You didn't lose me, Ryan. You gave me away." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees like pages turning. For the first time in months, I turned off every light and let the house go dark, not out of fear, but out of peace. Tomorrow, I'd start fresh. Tomorrow, I'd open a new ledger. And in the first line, I'd write, "This is mine." Justice didn't arrive in the thunderous way I'd imagined. No handcuffs, no shouting in a courtroom. It came instead through paper dates and signatures, the small things that make lies crumble. On April 17th, I received a certified envelope from Brightview Financial Compliance Division. Inside was an official letter bearing their embossed seal. It read, "Following the conclusion of our internal investigation, Brightview Financial confirms that all client accounts belonging to Mr. Arthur Hayes have been fully restored. Funds previously misallocated were returned in full on April 15th, 2:17 p.m. Furthermore, Mr. Ryan Hayes' license as an independent financial agent has been suspended pending final review by the Ohio Division of Securities." It went on with the language of closure. No further action required from the client. Case file archived, audit complete. But what struck me most wasn't the legal phrasing. It was the last line. Mr. Hayes' diligence in record-keeping and immediate reporting prevented a total loss of assets. My ledger had been my weapon. The same old spiral notebook I'd used to track my heart meds and groceries was now the record that saved me. That afternoon, Alan came by the house carrying a slim folder. "Officially closed," he said, setting it on the table. "Settlement filed, restitution confirmed, no further claims pending." I poured us both a cup of coffee. "You ever get tired of the paperwork?" I asked. He chuckled. "Never. Paperwork is truth people can't argue with." He left after an hour, and I sat alone with the folder open before me, the stamped settlement agreement, the notarized compliance letter, and one final document. Notice of license suspension, Ryan Hayes. Dated April 16th. There was no satisfaction in it, just silence. That evening, I got a call from Harper Miles, the mediator who'd watched my family's fracture unfold like a courtroom drama. Her voice was gentle. "Mr. Hayes, I wanted to tell you personally. Your case has been added to our training archive for ethical case studies. They'll anonymize it, of course, but it'll be used to teach financial mediators how to recognize elder exploitation before it escalates." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "So my life's lesson becomes homework," I said softly. "Or a warning," she replied. I thanked her, and for the first time since the fight began, I felt that what had happened might help someone else. Another parent, another widow, another pensioner whose signature was being coaxed by a smiling son. 2 days later, I visited the Lakewood courthouse to file a simple document, a property protection addendum that permanently restricted any power of attorney from being issued without dual legal consent. The clerk, a kind woman with silver hair, looked up as I handed it over. "I wish more folks your age did this before the storm hits," she said. On the way home, I stopped by the park where Ryan used to play Little League. The benches were chipped, the outfield rougher now. Her father stood by the fence, shouting encouragement to a small boy at bat. For a moment I saw Ryan at 9 years old, knees scraped, grin wide, yelling, "Did you see that, Dad?" I did. I'd seen it all. The bright beginnings, the arrogance, the fall. When I reached home, the sun was setting behind the house. I sat by the window, opened my ledger to the last page, and wrote slowly, "Justice delivered. April 17th. All debts settled except the one between father and son." The ink dried quickly, dark and final. Justice had come quietly but completely. The kind that doesn't roar. It just leaves the truth standing. The weeks that followed were quieter than any I'd known in years. No calls from banks. No envelopes marked urgent, just stillness, the kind that fills a house when truth finally has room to breathe. Spring had started to settle over Lakewood. The maple by the porch was budding again, the lake a soft mirror instead of winter glass. Every morning I'd take my coffee out back, open my ledger, and write a single line. Not transactions anymore, but reflections. Notes to myself. To remember what honesty costs and why it's worth paying. Maya visited sometimes. She'd bring fresh bread or a stack of mail from town. "You know," she said one afternoon, "most people would have let this slide. They'd say, "Family's family," and swallow the pain. I did that once, I told her, and it nearly cost me everything. She nodded, quiet for a moment. "You taught me something about patience. Real justice doesn't always need a gavel." We sat in the sunlight for a while, listening to the sound of the water and distant laughter from the park. It struck me that this, not revenge, not repayment, was the real ending. Peace isn't a verdict, it's an understanding. A week later I received a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. Ryan, standing beside an old RV somewhere out west. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes were softer. On the back, written in his familiar handwriting, were just 6 words. "I'm trying to be better, Dad." I stared at it for a long time. No address, no phone number, no apology, but maybe that was the point. Some debts can't be repaid. They can only be outgrown. That night, I went through the drawer where I kept every paper from this ordeal, the statements, the certified receipts, the mediation transcripts. I placed them neatly in a box and sealed it. Then I labeled it proof. Keep for record, not revenge. I tucked the box under the old cedar chest Elizabeth and I bought 40 years ago. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to reopen it. Later, as I sat by the lake, the moonlight stretched across the water like a silver line dividing past and present. I thought of Elizabeth again, her voice calm and steady in my mind. "The truth doesn't need to shout, Arthur. It just needs to stay standing." She was right. It had stood. Through lawyers and lies, signatures and shame, it stood. Before heading in, I wrote one last entry in my ledger. "Truth is slow, but it arrives." Then I closed the book, not with triumph, but with peace, the kind you only earn after losing something you once thought unbreakable. Justice had been served. Forgiveness, perhaps, was still on its way, and as the night wind moved over the lake, carrying the faint scent of spring, I realized something I'd been too tired to see before. Revenge hadn't given me freedom. Integrity had tomorrow. The ledger would stay closed, because some stories don't need new chapters, just quiet endings that tell the world, I survived, and I stayed honest. By May, the world had already moved on. The newspapers found new scandals, the neighbors stopped whispering, and my name faded from the gossip cycle. But I didn't mind. Anonymity felt like a reward. Every morning began the same. Black coffee, ledger closed, sunlight spilling through the kitchen blinds. I started walking again. Slow loops around the lake, passing the same dock where I once taught Ryan to cast a fishing line. The air smelled like lilacs and wet earth. Life had a rhythm again, one not measured by bank balances or settlements, but by peace. One afternoon, I stopped by Lakewood Community Bank to update my safe deposit access. The teller, a young man with freckles and an easy smile, recognized my name from the old case. "You're the gentleman from the Brightview thing, right?" he asked. I smiled. "That's one way to put it," he nodded. "Good for you, sir. Not many people your age fight back and win. That line stayed with me all the way home. Not many people your age fight back." He didn't mean it cruelly, but I understood the truth behind it. Most people my age were tired. Tired of arguing, tired of lawyers, tired of being called burdens by the very people they'd raised. But maybe I hadn't fought to win. Maybe I'd fought because walking away meant losing myself. The next day I met Alan for coffee. He looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. "You know, Art," he said, stirring his cup, "you could sue for emotional damages. You'd win." I shook my head. "I don't need another check. I just need this chapter closed." He smiled knowingly. "That's why you did win." After he left, I drove out to the edge of town where the Lakewood Veterans Memorial Park stood. Elizabeth's name was etched on the donation plaque. She'd helped raise the funds years ago. I placed a single rose beneath it, a habit she used to tease me for. "You bring flowers to stone," she'd say. "At least bring them when I'm alive." I whispered, "You were right again, Liz." Then I walked to the overlook where the river met the lake. The water shimmered in the late afternoon sun, and for a moment I thought I saw 2 reflections in the surface, mine and hers, faint but together. Back at home, the phone rang. It was Maya, her voice bright. "Guess what? The training module with your story went live. They titled it Ledgers of Truth. Your notes might actually help save a few people from losing everything. I laughed softly. Well, maybe something good came out of it after all. More than good, she said. You turned pain into proof. That night I took out my old ledger, the one that had started it all. Instead of numbers, I began writing lessons. If someone says, trust me, keep a copy. A signature is a promise. Don't give it away. Silence isn't peace when it hides injustice. Revenge fades. Truth doesn't. When I finished, I closed the book and wrote across the cover, for Ryan, someday, maybe one day he'd read it. Maybe he'd understand. The clock on the mantel ticked softly. Outside, the lake was calm. Inside, so was I. The fight was over. The damage was done. But I was still standing, ledger closed, heart open, and for a man my age, that was victory enough. Summer arrived early that year. The air over Lakewood shimmered with heat, the kind that makes time feel slower, as if the world itself wanted me to pause. I was in the garden, trimming the hedge Elizabeth used to shape into hearts every June when the mail truck stopped by. The driver handed me a single white envelope, return address, State of Ohio, Office of Financial Regulation. I thought it was another dull notice, maybe confirmation that the case had officially closed. But when I opened it, I froze. Mr. Hayes, we are writing to inform you that the Ohio Division of Securities has completed its disciplinary review of Mr. Ryan Hayes. As of June 12th, his professional license has been permanently revoked. Furthermore, due to violations of fiduciary duty, he is disqualified from serving as a financial agent in any capacity within the state. There was a final line, almost cruel in its simplicity. Mr. Hayes may reapply for reinstatement in 10 years, contingent upon restitution and good conduct. 10 years. He'd be almost 50 by then. I sat down on the porch step, letter in hand, and stared across the lake. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent half a century building security for my family, and it took my own son 10 months to gamble it away. Later that evening, as the sky turned amber, I poured myself a glass of iced tea and opened the ledger one last time. Every page was filled, from the first entry, proof of ownership, 0303, to the last, justice delivered. A417. I realized there was nothing left to write. The story was over, at least on paper, but life has a way of adding one last twist. Around 8 o'clock, I heard tires on gravel, cautious, slow. Through the window, I saw an old pickup truck parked by the gate. The driver's door opened, and Ryan stepped out. No suit, no briefcase, just jeans, a faded t-shirt, and a face that looked like it had finally met humility. He didn't knock right away. He just stood there, hat in hand, staring at the porch light like he wasn't sure he deserved to step into it. Then softly, "Dad?" I opened the door. The silence between us was heavy, but not hostile. "I got the letter," he said. "I know," he looked down. "Guess I finally learned what you meant when you said money shows who a man really is." I nodded. "It does." He took a deep breath. "I've been volunteering at a shelter in Dayton, helping seniors fill out benefit forms. Figured maybe I could learn something about integrity before I talk about earning it again. For the first time in a long while, I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who used to race me across the lake, barefoot and fearless. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "Just a chance to be your son again someday." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I motioned to the porch chair across from me. "Sit down. You look tired." He hesitated, then did. We sat there in the soft hum of crickets and evening wind. No apologies, no grand speeches, just quiet understanding, the kind that only comes when truth has finished its work. The irony, I realized, wasn't that my son lost everything. It was that through losing it, he might have found himself again. Before we went inside, I closed the ledger for good. I didn't lock it away this time. I left it on the table, open to the final line I'd written months before. Truth endures. Ryan glanced at it and whispered, almost to himself, "Yeah, it does." And for the first time since all this began, I believed him.